I like how the car dives into the corner, plants the front end, just glides it right through. There's just something about Tamiya's mini kits. What is it? The build, the drive, I don't know, whatever it is, they're just so much fun. And we're gonna see if that holds true for the kit on the bench. You see here, the new MB-01 chassis with the Fiat Abarth 1000 TR Berlina Corse body set. Hopefully I got that name right. It looks like a great kit, guys. It's gonna be a lot of fun to build up. So I'm gonna hit the bench here in my little Tamiya spot, get it together so we can go over the features, and I'm gonna show you how it performs as well. The Fiat's all together and this car looks amazing. Tamiya does an awesome job in recreating some really unique vehicles in RC form. And this one has a really interesting background to it. They have a little snippet on the side of the box. It's racing heritage, but I love the way this car looks. That Corse gray color is really growing on me every time I see it. But you're gonna have to go and paint that Corse gray, the white, and a lot of the engine detail, and then cut out all the decals and put them on. And some of these pinstripes, guys, those take some time to cut out and apply. But once it's done, I mean, the job is totally worth it. I love the front racing bumper that they recreated, the larger fender flares, the hatch tilted up in the back, just like the real car had. They've got chrome bezels around the headlights and the chrome emblem on the front. Little mirrors on the side, and let's spin this around so you can check out this engine detail. You got to spend a lot of time painting the engine with regular model paints, and there's even little details that are hidden, but at least you know they're there as the builder. Love the pipe sticking out of the back, and again, just the engine detail is so cool. Decals for the taillights. The only downside to this body actually is they had to go and put the body post through it to secure it. I really wish they would come up with a hidden body mounting system for their cars just so we can enjoy their bodies even more. All right, let's pop this off and take a look at the new MB-01 chassis. This is actually a really cool chassis, guys. If you're a Mini fan, I think you're really gonna geek out on this. There's so much tunability of this chassis. It makes it an interesting build and probably really interesting to drive. Let's start off in the front. And the suspension here is just friction dampers for the shocks, fixed double wishbone suspension, plastic steering knuckles, and kind of your typical Tamiya design. Just really compact, stout. There is a little slop in the suspension. What I do like about this particular setup is they have a droop screw, so you could go and limit your ride height or set your ride height. And it's just a really simple setup that works. There's minimal suspension tuning to it as far as leaning the shocks. And then the rear is just basically the same as the front. And the reason being is you could go and turn this car from a rear-wheel drive car into a front-wheel drive car with just minimal changes. I might as well talk about how you can make that change really quick. So here is your steering rack assembly. It's just a twin crank with a single Ackerman bar. And you could actually take this plate in the front that kind of has this little engine detail on it. You could unscrew it, move it to the back, take this plate and move it back. You add in a short tie rod, and now you have a front-wheel drive car. It's pretty simple. Now let's take a look at the semi-tub chassis, and it's two-piece, so you could actually adjust the wheelbase on this as well. They're gonna have 3 different wheelbases for it, and here are here's the 4 screws in the bottom deck where you could go and unscrew and move that chassis section back. Pretty interesting look to the bottom of the chassis. They've got these tunnel areas here, and I think this actually adds a bit of bracing to the chassis. The chassis doesn't have that much flex in it at all. As far as the battery mounting setup, this is pretty cool as well. You could go and throw LiPo batteries inside easily. You can see it's got squared off edges rather than the rounded edges on some other cars. And then to access the battery, you could do it from either side. You pull the body clip off and this little hatch swings up. And then there's a little bit of bracing on the sides and such. There's the servo mount there with the long rod up to the steering for the front wheel drive setup. Now we just really need to get into the drivetrain. So this is set up as a rear wheel drive car right now. The spur gear in the center, metal pinion gear. It's a really large pinion gear, and it's got this short stubby drive shaft set up in the center. Little coupler type setup, I guess is the best way to describe it. Before it goes back to the rear plastic gear differential, they have composite outdrive cups that are molded into the steel shafts, then the composite dog bones out to the axle. Now, like usual Tamiya kit, this one does come with bushings. You're gonna see bearings in my video because I got the bearing kit for it ahead of time and built it up with the bearing kit. Now this might be one of the coolest features of the car. I like to think of it as a little cheat mode. You can actually go and shift the motor up to boost traction in low grip conditions. It's not new technology, but it's pretty cool that they integrated it into this car. It just takes a few minutes and it's less than 10 screws to make this swap. They include the usual Mabuchi 540 silver can motor, and then a Hobbywing base 1060 speed controller. Still fitted with a Tamiya connector, and I went with a Spectrum radio system for it and a Spectrum S614 servo that I pulled out of a ready to run. Finally, let's talk about the wheels and tires. They got the gunmetal wheels, and check this out. They have a small diameter front tire and a larger diameter rear tire to give it that racing look. No foam inserts on the inside. They give you a bunch of body mounts in the kit in case you want to swap out bodies later on. I like the little mini bumpers on the front and rear. Now we just need to go out and drive this. I'm really excited to see how it handles. Well guys, I'm up at RC Madness again in Enfield, Connecticut. I'll have a link in the video description below to this place. We're going to use their on-road track to check out the Fiat today. I'm just going to take it really easy on this first lap here. It's a rear-wheel drive car, so you got to watch it coming out of the corners. You don't want to punch it and spin this thing around. Oh, and the brakes actually really whip it around as well. A little push in the front, that's going to help out. And I'm already getting used to this thing. This thing is fun. They got a tall gear in here, so it's got some decent speed out of that silver can motor. I'm just gonna put it in the center of the lanes, guys, because I really don't want to scratch up this body. But just roll gently through the corners. Look at that. All you gotta do is roll through the corners with this. Don't hit the brake. Just find your let-off points, and you could really dial in some fast laps with this. For the stock system, of course. It's got good acceleration out of the corners too, even with that larger pinion gear on it. Just roll onto the straightaway, 3/4 throttle, full throttle, roll back. Just glide right through that corner, punch it coming out. Look at that. A little bit of chassis roll, that's totally fine. I cut that corner a little close. Look at this thing, it's got some speed on the back straight. This chassis is a lot of fun, guys. Wow. I mean, I've driven minis before, I like minis. But this thing's got some good balance, just the right amount of push to make it fun through the corners and not oversteer. As long as you keep off the brake, that rear end's not gonna come around. This is a fun car. This is a really good chassis from them. So it's been a minute since I've driven a Tamiya mini car. I think the last one I had my hands on was the M-06. And from what I remember, I think this MB-01 was just a little bit better out on the track. I had a great time driving it, and what really impressed me is how this car really kind of just planted itself in the corners and glided through, and I was able to power out. Believe it or not, that little Mabuchi motor in there gave me some pretty decent speed on the straightaway with that large pinion gear on there. Again, it does well in the corners. Mostly I drove it with the motor laid down. I did give it a shot with the motor standing up, because it's pretty cool. You get to tune it, as I mentioned earlier, but I just felt I wasn't as consistent with the weight transfer, so I like the laid down motor version of it better. I think they did a really good job on this thing. I didn't notice all that chatter from the, the loose plastics, which we saw, but it just wasn't really evident out on the track. It was just plain smooth driving with this, and it's gonna loosen up over time. But look at this thing. This is a great scale model that you can get to drive, and that's what it's all about, being able to drive this. Not so much the racing side of it, but just enjoying a unique vehicle in RC form. I'll have links in the video description below for it. And while you're there, let me know what body style you would like to see next on this mini platform.